Okay, so it is 7 p.m. on Wednesday, December 8th, 2021, and I'd like to call this Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting to order. This meeting is being held electronically as per section 19.1 of the town's procedure bylaw number 6228-19, as amended due to the COVID-19 situation, and will be live streamed on the town's YouTube channel. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated by Legislative Services?
Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne. And a second?
Don.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John. Okay. Any questions or comments on the agenda? Okay, no questions or comments, then I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, there are none this evening. So we move on to receipt of the minutes. May I please have a motion to receive the meeting minutes of October 27th, 2021?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. And a second?
Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? That carries. And may I please have a motion to receive the meeting minutes of October 27th, 2021?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. Second?
John.
Thank you, John. Any questions or comments on these minutes? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that carries. We have no delegations this evening, so that brings us to our matters for consideration, beginning with item 6.1, memorandum from Accessibility Advisor regarding site plan application OPA-2021-06 and ZBA-2021-08, submission 1, and this is for 200 Wellington Street West. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. And a second?
Joanne.
John.
Thank you, Joanne. All right. Did you want to begin us off with this, Matt?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first two site plans we're going to be looking at here, 6.1 and 6.2. We're going to get through these very quickly. 6.3 will take us a little bit more time, so we'll take our time over there. So for this first one over here, we're going to be looking at OPA 2106. So this is the first submission that we're looking at this. It's located at 200 Wellington Street West, which is close to the Wellington and Bathurst intersection. So it's a little plot of land over there. We are looking at basically a small little like strata area of townhouses being built in this particular site plan application. So just to kind of start us off, here's just a figure taking a look at the structure of the townhomes. And then, like I was mentioning, it's going to be a very quick and simple site plan application. So just as you guys can see over here, like I was mentioning, this is Bathurst over here on the west side of the map. And then we've got Wellington Street. And so the site plan application, you guys can correct me wrong. I think this is pretty close to where that church was over there on Wellington Street for the actual site of this new location. And so here is the site plan application. I'll zoom in and we'll kind of go through it. Again, it's pretty much a bare bones application in terms of what's kind of being constructed over here. Let me just move your faces out of the way.
That church was gone. Is it gone?
And I think that's where this is being built. So it could be.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
just to the east of the church.
Okay.
Yeah, the church is still there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So we are on Wellington Street here over towards the bottom. You guys can see that there's these existing sidewalk coming across east to westbound. There is an exterior path of travel where you can see my mouse leading up into this strata over here. And then this is going to be the location of the townhouse units. So in terms of accessibility, there is no visitor parking, anything along those lines. The only thing I was going to kind of bring up to the Accessibility Advisory Committee is whether or not we feel or would like to deem a crosswalk being added in between these couple of blocks of homes. But the traffic and volume of cars kind of going through this area is going to be so minimal that I didn't really add it into my comments, but wanted to bring it up to you guys, see if you have a differing opinion, whether or not you think would be beneficial over here. Over here, there should be a single barrier-free parking spot added in, and then that would be pretty much it in terms of the site plan application. So there was nothing added in on here. I was speaking to the planners earlier today. They have already spoken with them about this piece. But yeah, other than that, very, very simple site plan application. No parks or parkettes added in here. There is no different trails or pathways kind of leading behind the strata into any of the existing land plots. But yeah, I just wanted to see whether or not you guys had any additional comments. So like I said, barrier-free parking spot to be added over here in the visitor. And then I was wondering whether or not you guys think there should be a crosswalk added in over here between the two landscape pieces between block 2 and block 1.
Can we like ask for like a wider sidewalk, considering this is the only sidewalk in and out of that whole little area?
Yeah, that's not a problem at all. I don't know. So there's always like the piece with the zoning bylaw. I don't know how much space over here is required in terms of the zoning bylaw for the residential homes. The 1.5 meters is the standard, but I have no problem asking for a 2 meter width. That's not an issue. I'll add that note in, Matthew.
Mhm.
Any comments about the crosswalk? Like I said, my personal opinion, I don't really see the need in in a small strata like this to kind of connect these two blocks, but I was curious whether or not you guys had a differing opinion on that piece.
So when this sidewalk ends in this little new division,
Yep.
they have like a curb depression, so it enters onto the road.
They're not indicating a curb depression over here. By law, they should have one. Sorry, not by law. This is one of those conversations I've actually had with engineering team, which is, do we add a curb depression over here because it just leads onto the roadway with nowhere else to kind of go? So it's always interesting. It's not really addressed in the legislation. So it's a conversation for us to have. It's not indicating a depression on this case, but that's because it doesn't lead to anything, because there's just the townhomes over there.
Yep.
So we can definitely ask for it. I'm actually curious what your guys' opinion is on this. Usually for me, this one might be a little bit different just because we're in a subdivision. Normally, if there is no exterior path of travel on the opposite side, I prefer that there isn't a depression, because if you do have someone coming in with like a true visual impairment, you're just leading them into a roadway, right? So that's just my 2 cents on that, but I'm more than happy to hear what you guys think about that as well.
Matt, I'm just wondering about that back laneway there. I mean, is it strictly meant to be for cars? I mean, there's
here?
yeah, so that back laneway there, I mean, there are sets of townhomes in the back there. So, I mean, I'm just wondering why there is no walkway going along there.
Too little space.
Is it
Yeah.
is it just space issue or?
It's probably a spacing piece, and like I said, with the zoning bylaw, usually there is a specific amount of space that's required on the front lawn before, like, between a sidewalk kind of piece. It's a question I can bring back to planning. I don't know like why they decided not to have a walkway in this, and whether or not there is a requirement for connectivity. Our engineering department loves to push sidewalks. And so I'm sure they had a comment on that piece in there, but I'm more than happy to follow up with them. But usually it's a zoning bylaw piece. And so that's probably why they don't have anything connecting this. And to answer your question, yeah, this is just the roadway between the homes, basically, to be able to get in and out of their driveways and onto the main path over here to Wellington.
Right, okay.
So you said there was going to be an accessible parking spot with like in the visitor section?
There has to be one added in right over here where my mouse is hovering next to.
Then you're going to need a curb depression to get onto the sidewalk from the.
To the sidewalk over here, correct.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, though, then I would think that the curve depression on the far end, even though it leads into the road.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that it would be silly not to have it, because, you run into an instance where someone may need it, and it would, if they are using that, accessible spot, parking spot, they just may need to get to those back houses there, right? So, and I know if someone with a sighted parent.
Yep, and that's where that's that tough conversation, right? Because we have a couple of those, even just in like some of the older parks, not parks, but right up from town hall, like where like we have like some of the retirement homes, we have some of like those dead end sidewalks that kind of just come to the roadway. And then we've been asked multiple times about adding in those curb depressions. But like I said, it's just like that conversation. Now, this is a very safe, like I said, it's gonna be very low volume. So I'm more than comfortable adding in the curb depression over here because the risk is so low, right? A lot of the time when we're talking like in more of our municipal neighborhoods where you have a lot of traffic kind of flowing through, especially where you have like those curved roads, you don't want to risk people potentially walking out unless it's a designated crosswalk for people to kind of go across the path of travel for vehicles. So in this case, I agree. If we're going to be adding in the curb depression for the barrier-free parking when they added in over here for the visitor spots, then we could add in that additional depression over there for the end of the sidewalk.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm good with those comments.
And also make sure they remember that tactile pads are required.
Yeah.
Under
Yep.
OTA.
Okay, so we've got like I said, we're already adding in the barrier-free parking. So we'll have the curb depression added in for the end of the sidewalk. And like I said, for the access aisle, there's always a depression that's added in there to enter into the exterior path of travel. So there will be those two. Matthew is asking for the additional width on the exterior path of travel leaving over to Wellington. And then we're okay with no crosswalk going across the two block areas over here. Like I said, this just kind of leads into like they're showing like a landscape area. So I don't see the value. There's not going to be anyone really over here. And then there's no exterior path of travel leading back down to Wellington. So I don't think it's going to present any value for the residents in this area.
Yeah, I don't see it as being necessary.
Okay. Just going to slide over a couple, just make sure there's nothing else that you guys would want to see on this. Like I said, it was a simple site plan. Yeah. So here are the townhouses. Again, very simple layouts. And then there was nothing else sent in from the developer on this piece. So that's pretty much it. So if there's no further comments, I'll give you guys a second, but then it's over to you, Rochelle.
Okay, are there any further comments or questions then? Doesn't sound like it. Okay, so with no further comments, I will go ahead and call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. That brings us to 6.2. Memorandum from Accessibility Advisor regarding site plan application OPA-2021-05 and ZBA-2021-07, submission 1, and this is for 14086 Young Street. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew, and a second.
John.
Thank you, John. Okay, Matt, you can begin us with this item.
Thanks, Rochelle. And so if you want to talk even easier site plan to take a look at in terms of nothing really being there, this is it. So we've got 4 single family dwellings being added in over here. This is just off of Young Street. So this is going to be a private street that's dead end. Again, no exterior path of travel was added in on the opposite side of these homes. That is something that we can converse about. But other than that, we've got 4 houses being added in over here. And then we've got the, I don't even think they were showing on this site plan, but I'm pretty sure there is on Young Street when I Google mapped it, that there is an exterior path of travel here. Yeah, it's not showing on here, but I can double check with that piece afterwards. But like I said, I don't know if we want to push an exterior path of travel over here, but I'm willing to go back to planning if you guys think it's justified. It's just the 5 lots over here. I was saying 4. There's 5, but I had no comments on this because it was just residential homes. So I was just curious whether or not you guys had anything else you wanted to add in.
Is this a brand new laneway or is it already there and they're just
Brand new.
Oh, is
Brand
it?
new
Okay.
laneway, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll just double check here that there was no other site plans, but off my memory, it was just the houses, it looks like.
I always like pushing for sidewalks just because.
Yeah, so we can go ahead with that. We can add a sidewalk here. I can't get off my screen right now just because I'm showing it to you guys, but maybe Matthew, I know you're quick with this stuff. If you want to kind of Google street map this to see whether or not there is an
I've already been
existing-
doing that.
Yeah, is there an exterior path of travel over here on Yonge Street on the side?
Not yet, but if you have seen the proposed BRT infrastructure and designs, there'll be sidewalks all along there in 10 years easily.
Yeah, so then it would be worthwhile for them to invest into having the path of travel over here to connect onto Yonge Street.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's also a future laneway or road into a future development.
Yeah, right over here.
Yeah.
I'll zoom in on that for you guys.
So can
Correct.
we
Go ahead,
ask
Matt.
for like a sidewalk to connect into the future section, like to the line?
Sorry, into the future
So, like-
development, or are you talking into Yonge Street?
So go from like Young along this street,
Yep,
and then when you get to that intersection that says snow storage area, but future development,
yep,
have a piece of sidewalk going across and then stopping there because eventually it'll connect to something.
yep.
That way it's all connected and future ready.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with our engineering department. Like I said, they're usually on top of adding in those extra sidewalks when the developers are trying to avoid them. So I'll speak to Michael Batt, which is our transport analyst, who usually looks over that kind of stuff, and see if he's added that comment in. Otherwise, we can submit it from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Okay, other than that, I don't think there is anything else for us to comment on this. Like I said, very, very simple lot. So if there's no further comments, Rochelle, we can jump over to 6.3 next.
Okay. All right. It sounds like there are no further comments then. I will call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries. All right, item 6.3, memorandum from Accessibility Advisor regarding site plan application SP-2021-12, submission 1, and this is for 377 Hartwell Way. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew, and a second.
John,
Thanks, John. Okay, Matt, do you want to lead us on this?
Absolutely. So we're going to take our time on this one. There's a lot of detail in the site plan applications. So like I was mentioning before we got into our meeting, I'm going to shut my screen off over here because I'm going to bring my computer nice and close to my face to kind of go through this with you guys. So I'm going to turn that piece off. And so like Rochelle was mentioning, this is going to be located on 377 Hartwell. And this is going to be close to the intersection of St. John's and Leslie. It's probably the biggest like main intersection in terms of like where the school is going to be located close to. Overall, the site looks pretty good. Now, there are quite a bit of comments that I made on this as considerations and a couple of things to be adjusted. So we'll go through this in great detail as a team. I'm going to start off over here to kind of just give you guys a quick look at the actual school itself. So front entrance is located right over here where my, it's over here where my mouse is hovering. And then on the opposite side over here, we've got a child daycare system being installed as well. So we've got a couple of different parking lots over here. We've got one for the childcare. In the back of the school, we have basically an asphalt play area. Back of the school, we've got additional parking where we have barrier-free parking for staff members, and then the actual laneways for the bus to be dropping off kids coming into school. Overall connectivity-wise, and then we'll look at this in more detail on the actual site plan itself. But you can see that we have basically sidewalks running across the entire width of the school. We have connectivity over to the actual park in the background, connectivity over to where the child care center is going to be, and then over to the school as well from a number of different areas. So the exterior path of travel is leading into the school. There are plenty, and there is ability to get in pretty much from every access point of the school. So that was good to see. So we're going to jump over to the actual site plan itself. I will apologize in advance. So this first one is going to be the main component that we're going to be looking at. So we'll spend a lot of time over here. The next ones that we take a look at are going to go into the first floor and second floor with a little bit more detail, but the map actually flips. So when we're looking at this, wherever I say the front entrance is, on the next couple, they're going to be opposite of each other. So keep that in mind as we're going, and I'll remind you when we flip over to those. But it kind of took me for a spin when I was looking at it the first time, like, this doesn't look the same. So just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'll zoom right in. We'll start off with the parking lot. On this side, we do have an even distribution of barrier-free parking. So we've got our 2 type B spots at 2,700 millimeters. Got our access aisles. They have added in their curb depressions with the tactile plates. And then that leads in over to the exterior path of travel, which is as close as it gets basically over to the main entrance. In the main entrance area, we do have a canopy above just to kind of help with weather protection for any of the students coming in. And then additionally, in this parking lot, we've got 2 different drop-off areas. So, and I'll give you guys a heads up. I'll go through the comments that I've written down afterwards. I want to go through all of this and show you everything about the school before I show you the comments. In the school parking lot, we've got 2 different drop-off zones, as you can see over here. Excuse me. We've got one located towards the south side, and then we've got an additional one leading in over towards the main entrance. On this one, it does look like they have, and sorry, towards the front, they also have a third one. They have indicated on over here on the north side that they do have a rollover curb, but the other ones did not mention anything. So these are usually like your kiss and ride lane. So where parents are dropping off the kids, and then towards the front of the school, this is going to be where your buses are coming in. In the comments, I did mention, and I think it's beneficial, is to have that curb lay-by over here for pretty much all the drop-off zones. So I'd like to see that added in. Like it says rollover curb over here, but I don't know what that's indicating, right? So I wanted to make sure and put in the comments that basically wherever the people are being dropped off, that's included in there as well. I think it'd be a nice addition. Even though like we might have some teachers coming in here or visitors using the barrier-free parking. If anyone's using this zone to drop off their kid and they do have their own assistive van or anything, they can use that and take advantage of the rollover curb. So we're going to jump into the school itself. So the main entrance is over here. As soon as you enter into the main entrance of the building, we've got our vice president's office, vice principal's office, and then we have the principal's office located towards the front. There is a healthy amount of actually washrooms that I found they put into the school. I don't know if schools have different requirements for it. So maybe that's something I kind of look into, but the staff area does have their own barrier-free washroom. And then located towards the back of the school, we have a couple of different ones as well. So we can tell we have a universal washroom towards the back, and then they have actual boys and girls washrooms indicated over here. And then additionally, they have actual universal washrooms located over here. So you have unisex washrooms added in. And so these are different than your typical universal washrooms. And that might be something that we want to talk about, is whether or not we think there is a difference between having just a universal washroom installed over here and having it unisex. So I don't know if that's something that the developer and maybe someone on this committee might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there would be more value in just having these as universal washrooms, which are the exact same thing as having a unisex washroom. These are individual washrooms, they're genderless, and so anyone could be using them. So I think it would be a little bit more advantageous where someone is coming in through the main entrance, and then you have the actual universal washrooms as close to the main entrance versus the back of the school over here. So that'll be food for thought when we're having our conversation. Just going down the main hallway over here, we've got a couple of staff rooms, classrooms leading around basically the edges of the school itself. Towards the back, they do have a community classroom for complex needs. And so you're going to have a lot of de-escalation rooms located over here. So you can see we've got two de-escalation rooms. This is indicated as well in the more specific site plans that we'll take a look at in the next couple of slides. But they have added padding over to the walls over here in the de-escalation rooms, just for any children that are coming in that might have disabilities. And so this is something that's talked about quite a bit in our community services department, about something that we would like to add to our future buildings, actually, for the Aurora Family Leisure Complex and the Stronach Rural Recreation Complex. So that was a nice touch to have these added into the school, in my opinion. Additionally, they have seminar rooms. And so for all of these, induction loops have been requested by me. And then as we, like I said, go around the school, you've got your classrooms, additional washrooms over here on the opposite side of where we had our universal washrooms. And then we're going to jump over to the opposite side of the school where I was mentioning you have your, I'll zoom out a little bit just so you guys can just orient yourselves again. So we're basically at the childcare area at this point. And so on the outsides, we do have an exterior path of travel that leads into this area. There is one barrier-free parking spot added in. It does meet in terms of code for how many are required in here. And it's okay that they added in the type B barrier-free parking spot, but I did mention in my comments that I would prefer for this to be a type A. If there's only being one barrier-free parking spot added over in this location, it should be the wider one in case anyone's coming in with accessibility vans that need a little bit more space. So I asked them to go above that. And I think it's a good talking point for us as well, as like we did in our last meeting, whether or not we think an additional one would be beneficial in this area. So I think there's about 10 parking spots over here. If someone's looking, they can correct me if I'm wrong as we kind of go through this. So leading back into the building, like I said, main entrance over here in the actual childcare center. Let me just zoom back in for you guys. We've got our preschool rooms. They do have washrooms over here, nothing universal. They just have basically your generic washrooms where people are able to share with their stalls. And then leading through the rest of the school, you've got your instrumental room, a couple other kindergarten rooms. And then right in the middle, we've got a gymnasium. And there is more detail in the next couple of slides as we go into them. As to what's in the gymnasium. They do have a stage in there. It looked like it was mostly serviced by stairs. And so one of the comments I have as well is to look into either providing some sort of lift or an alternative way for people that have mobility issues being able to access that stage as well, because from what I could see in the site plans, there was nothing indicated for that piece. So that's a look at the main floor, very high level. Before I jump into the detailed ones that have both the first floor and the second floor, any questions before I kind of skip ahead to those pieces about what we've gone over so far?
On the universal unisex washrooms,
Yep, let me just zoom in.
yeah, they look ideal in terms of accessibility.
These
What
ones
about-
over here, John?
Yeah. What about
Yep.
Hoyer lifts and so on? And a change table.
So a universal washroom, so this one down here, for example, they would be designated where they have to have those accessible change tables and stuff. Yeah, so under the OBC, those would be implied to have that added in over there. And that's
Right.
what I'm saying. I think it would be beneficial for these to just be, even if it was just one, right? Like, because these might be a little bit smaller spaces that they've designated as unisex. I'd almost prefer for them to have this as one larger universal washroom that serves both purposes rather than just having two smaller ones.
Okay.
Any other questions, or should I just jump over? Crickets. All right, let's go. Okay, so we're gonna, and again, like I said, I apologize for the orientation of these maps. So the way they flipped it over here, we're looking at the second floor in this one. So let's go through that, and then we'll jump back over to the first floor just so you guys have a wholesome view of what the school looks like. Oh, I will jump back one slide because I missed the elevator in here.
Yes.
Let's jump over into that.
I was just looking for that actually.
Yep, it's right over here. So where we were looking at the unisex washrooms, if you just slide down to the right, you'll see that they have a lift indicated over here. And so that would be what leads over to the second floor.
Does that connect to the stage too?
No. So, and that's where I'm curious, because like you can see over here, like the way they have like these breaks, this leads into the stage area of the gymnasium. But when we look at the first floor plan in a little bit more detail, you'll notice that there isn't really any indication from when I looked at this that there is a way for that lift to work towards the stage. Now, maybe they have planned on it and I just missed it, but that's something we could look at together once we get to the first floor plan.
Matt, is it an elevator or a lift? Like, is it one of those like key thingies or?
It just says lift on the site plan map, so we can clarify with them. My preference is obviously for an elevator. I hate those key lifts that some of the schools have tried using in the past.
They're awful.
Yeah, 100%. So we can make that a point to just emphasize that it's an elevator being added in there, not a key lift, which I've seen in some of the older schools. But generally speaking, they usually use those lifts in retrofit situations versus actually like using an elevator. But we can clarify with them to ensure that it is an elevator and not a key lift being used for the school. Because then even if a student wants to use it, if they don't have the key on them, they don't have access to the second floor. And there are amenities over there, like a library and stuff, which we'll go over, that you obviously want your students being able to access without having someone to kind of guide them through. And I think someone is supposed to ask a question there, so go ahead.
My elementary school was pretty new when I got into it. It was like 2006, I think. And it had a keyed lift.
Yeah.
And it wasn't retrofitted. That was put in. And that was one of the big issues. Was there was one, if I remember correctly, there's one girl who she had issues because she had an issue with her hand where she couldn't get precise movement. So she always had to get help to get the key in to use the lift.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
That was not great.
Yeah, it's a dignity and respect piece, right? You want to be able to ensure that people can access everywhere in the building without having someone to kind of help them through that process, right? So I completely agree with you guys. We can definitely clarify that piece and ensure that's an elevator being added in and not a lift.
Yeah.
Yes, good.
Okie dokes. We'll jump over to the second floor. Same thing, like I said earlier, everything is backwards. So we're going to start at the elevator because that's where everyone knows where it is. Okay, here we go. So again, it's on the flip side on this part of the school. So bottom was junior kindergarten areas. Top of the floor is like most of your traditional elementary schools. You're going to have some of your higher classes. Along the left side over here, we've got a bunch of designated classrooms towards the corner of the building. And again, I can't use east, west, north because I don't know based on the map flipping around right now where I am in terms of orientation. But we've got our art room. They've got a science room designated over here. Again, an additional seminar room. And then they actually have their library located in this corner over here. And so as we move up, we've got a support student center, an additional classroom. Before I continue up the actual school itself, I'm just going to drop back to the lift area and go over the washrooms. So right next to the lift, we've got a little IT area, boys washroom, girls washroom. Again, we've got the unisex washrooms, which like we were talking about with John on the main floor. My preference, and it seems like you guys are on board with this, is actually to have these just basically put in as universal washrooms. Again, I think it's more beneficial, serves the same purpose. And then I can clarify with the developer if that's what that means, or maybe it's just because they're looking at gender classifications that they have a unisex washroom versus a universal washroom. So that's something for me to get educated on in terms of what they're adding in over here. But I think it'd be better for a universal washroom in that case. Going up the building again, additional classrooms. Nothing too fancy. Additional classrooms. Again, towards the center over here is that gymnasium, right? And so in the next screen that we're going to jump over to after this one, we will see the actual detail where the stage and stuff is. So we'll go into that momentarily. Again, we'll just continue our laps around. Classrooms. Additional washrooms. Another support center. And then I could have sworn when I was looking at this earlier, there it is, barrier-free washroom right here. So this is the universal washroom right next over to the lift, which that's great in that case. but I think we could ask for this to be an additional one added in over here. So the second floor, very simple. There's a couple of staircases over here. I've added in my general comments that the tactile plates and emergency chairs that are normally requested by the committee be added in for the staircases as well. So that's been covered. So the second floor, pretty simple. Any questions before I jump back over to the first floor and we take a look at the detailed plan over there? Okay. And then before I do jump in, I just want to clarify, because I know John and I were talking about it. How does the rest of the committee feel about this? Again, I don't want to step on anyone's toes in terms of what they think about unisex versus universal washrooms, but hoping I get a couple of extra opinions whether we want to move forward with that, or are we okay with having a mixture of the two?
So can I just clarify, because I'm slightly unsure. So the only distinction between the two then is that the universal has like the change tables and all of that.
Correct.
Is that okay?
Yeah, a universal washroom will have all of those elements. So you're talking like grab rails, change table, all of those kind of elements.
Okay.
Including like emergency buttons. And then I can look into the Ontario Building Code. Like obviously I specialize just on the accessibility side, so I've never kind of dove into like your regular washrooms and stuff. But I'm curious whether or not any of those applications that you would see in a universal washroom for barrier-free access would be applicable in the unisex washrooms as well.
Yeah, like I don't know, would it have any kind of accessibility feature at all? Because like I think that I think I'm in agreement that it definitely should have, and I just don't know whether or not it's possible, like for space wise, like to make it a full out like universal with all of the extra equipment you need to put in.
That's what I was saying. I think these would have to be kind of converted into one.
Right.
And that's what I was mentioning when I was looking at this. I thought it was intriguing, like the amount of washroom facility options that were offered all over both of the floors. So maybe underneath the school boards, there is a need to have specific unisex washrooms, girls, boys washrooms, and universal barrier-free washrooms. Maybe that's something that I'm just not aware of, but that's definitely something I'm going to look into.
Yeah, that would be kind of interesting to know the answer to, because I don't know either.
Okay, so we will definitely research this piece. Obviously, we'll have further submissions on this school. We'll probably see a second and third site plan for this. So I'll put that into the comments. And then when we take a look at submission 2, I'll probably have a good answer for you guys as to the difference between the unisex washroom and the universal washroom, and what they think about converting this, and whether or not there is a need actually to have this different the different needs in terms of the kind of washrooms that are being offered between universal, boys, girls, and unisex. So a couple of different, I think, educational points for all of us to learn about over there.
Is it possible that they make one smaller and make the other one universal? Because there's this whole gender identification thing that's going on in schools. Yep. It's very sensitive and it's becoming even more complex.
Yeah, well, I think you guys can see in my language of being very mindful of how to address this, because it's a very sensitive topic. And that's why, again, I agree, John, with the school boards. I know this is a big thing, is maybe there is a mandate to have that specifically, and it needs to be different than your traditional barrier-free universal washroom, and that you have to have something called the unisex washroom.
Yeah.
I think that's why I'm saying this is an educational piece even for me, because whenever I've looked through the OBC, you've got your just general facilities used, and then you see something called the universal washroom. But I've never come across anything in the OBC, again, not saying it's not there, but I've never come across the unisex portion for washrooms. So maybe this is a school thing, or maybe it's not, but we'll find out for sure. Alrighty, am I good? Any other questions on this piece before I jump over to the first floor? Cool. Alrighty. So same orientation as what we were looking at on the second floor. So here's what I was mentioning. We're going to jump right into the stage area. So we haven't talked about the gymnasium at all. So like I was mentioning on both the previous slides that we were looking at, gym, like most schools, located right in the middle. We've got a stage added in over here. They have indicated with the tactile plates and everything for the staircases, that's great. So there is entrance into the stage, but I was not seeing anything in terms of barrier-free access. So even in the back, you can see they've got staircases leading in. And then to Matthew's point about the lift.
There is, if you look at the picture of the lift, there's two little blocks on the stage side that indicate that there is a door.
Right. So this might be the way for them to be able to come into this area. So if that's the case, but that makes me think that it's a lift and not an elevator then.
Yeah, so that it says lift in it.
Yeah.
But I just spent like 10 minutes Googling what those little blocks mean. And apparently those
These
are
guys over
elevator
here?
blocks. Yeah.
They're what blocks?
Like they're indications of elevator doors.
Oh,
Some kind of engineering thing. I don't understand it either. Yeah.
Okay. So, and I'll still clarify with them regardless, but if that's what you've researched and that's what that means, fantastic. So they have indicated at least a barrier-free access onto the stage over here. But I think we are all in agreement if this is then just your general kind of lift that we've seen in schools previously, we want this to be turned into an elevator. So I'll definitely be speaking to the planning team about that piece just to make sure that we get that point across. Okie dokes. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
It is kind of interesting though, because in like ODA, the way they talk about it for OBC is lifts are like all the examples they give, lifts are for like retrofits and stuff. So if you're building new, they talk about elevators as the preferred method.
Yeah.
So you think with the amount of things that they've done to make the school inclusive, that they would have followed ODA's basically explicit recommendation to use an elevator.
Yeah, and so that's why I want to ask, right? Because again, it does say lift. It'll come down to the language being used by the specific developer. But we will find out whether or not it's an elevator lift or if it's going to be a key lift. And then we will definitely push for the elevator. I don't think we'll kind of back down on that point. I think we're all basically on the same page with being highly against those kind of lifts. They're really just absolutely inaccessible, in my opinion. They take away the whole aspect. Like even when we were looking at when we did add in the new pool lift into our 8-lane pool at the Stronach, the whole piece of having dignity and self-respect to be able to enter in and get out when you please is what we're moving towards, right? So same thing applies with elevator lifts. Those mechanical key lifts just don't work. And maybe we will learn something. Maybe there's something in school systems where they don't want kids using the lift themselves, and that's why they go down that road. I really don't know. So we'll have to hear back from them on that piece for sure.
Yeah, but if they're already installing those fancy security systems because of that new law that was put in a couple of years back, they can just put a pass card guarded elevator. So you give the student a pass card or something.
Yep.
Even that's more inclusive than.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Okay, dokes. So universal washroom, same thing, located right next to it. I'll start over in this corner. So again, kindergarten areas, each of them have their own washroom sections. Again, like I said, I feel like there's a ton of the washroom facilities being offered, but I guess that this is just school standards for each of the kindergarten rooms or preschool rooms to have that expectation. So maybe that's why each of them have their own. Again, further down, you've got your unisex washrooms being offered. And then this is where we were talking about where it's flipped, right? When we were looking at the first site plan, the, as I said, vice principal office and the principal's office was located on the other side of the previous map that we were looking at. So here we are again, front entrance leading in. And then again, a barrier-free washroom is included for staff members as well. Staff rooms, classrooms, they've got a couple of work and meeting rooms available for people to use. And then on the opposite side, we've got our boys' washroom, girls' washroom, pretty much everything that we went through previously. Again, community classroom for complex needs. And this is where I was mentioning for the de-escalation rooms that they've added in padding on all of the walls over here. We can clarify on this one specifically because they didn't indicate whether or not they padded this de-escalation room. And then this is actually a question I had for Haley, whether or not there's value, because I know you kind of work with the schools on this kind of stuff here. Well, you get students coming into your business. Are you aware if there's a value to not having a padded de-escalation room? I would imagine that it's more beneficial, but curious whether or not I'm missing out on something on that.
Oh, this is a very hot topic.
Okay.
In my world.
Yeah.
A lot of people see this because de-escalation rooms and these padded rooms have often been associated with kids being locked in them. So there's a big movement and push by parents to make it more of a sensory room where
Like a snoozling room?
where it's inviting for kids to go to de-escalate, but not this padded room that looks like you're kind of in jail, because that's how the kids perceive them. And oftentimes it's actually, for a lot of my kids, at least that I worked with, it's been actually further escalating to put them in there.
And that's why I wanted to ask you, because the snoozling rooms that are being added in like modern facilities and stuff obviously have a lot of different pieces of equipment that are there for sensory needs. And so I was curious whether or not in your field you've noticed that, is it just a room that they go in with these kids, or whether or not they actually provide sensory equipment for them to be using as well?
So normally, like, there would be like sensory equipment in there as well for them to use. Obviously, in a de-escalation, it's going to be stuff that's safe.
Right.
But there normally is some stuff to move and some of that snoozling equipment in there. Just a empty padded room for most of my clients, and even just calling it a de-escalation room is super triggering. Like, to me, I'm triggered by it. Like, that's not inclusive language at all.
Okay.
Sorry. This is my rant.
Oh, nothing to apologize. I was just writing notes while you were chatting over there. So that's something I'll ask in this. And like usually in this stage of development, they're not going to be talking about the equipment that's being used in quote unquote de-escalation rooms or anything. But I think we can make the comments in over there towards the school that I think we would like this to be treated more as, even if one of them was more of a snoozling room and one was your traditional quote unquote de-escalation room that's just kind of a padded room. I think the mix of the two and having them as a more welcoming room for an opportunity to help the children with their sensory needs would be beneficial.
Yeah, because then you're addressing the root cause of a lot of the escalations versus let's just put you in a padded room, which is not helping them, really.
So now I'm curious, because now you've got my gears spinning on here, because I don't work in the school system and I don't have clients that come from schools that have been using these. Even in my generation, I don't think we had de-escalation rooms, to be honest. Are these, like, is the teacher going in with them in the de-escalation room? Because now you're making it sound, and I'm just curious, again, this is just me thinking about this. Are the kids just going in there to kind of de-escalate on their own? Do they have support persons that come in with them? Like, how does it normally work?
There's supposed to be a support person with them.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you that doesn't always happen from my knowledge.
Right.
But there is supposed to be a support person in there. But still, like, how would you feel going into a room that's padded, that's empty with just a person there? How is that, like, how would you feel as that individual?
Right. Okay. Thank you, Haley. That was good to know. As we continue in this specific area, they do have a universal washroom indicated here as well. And like we were looking at previously, as we slide down, we've got our additional classrooms, boys and girls washroom, toddler rooms, and then we're pretty much coming back over to the front over here where we started off. Any questions? And then I'll jump over to the actual elevations and grades next over so you guys can see that. But anything on the actual internal site plans so far?
Not a question, but it's just, I think, a confirmation about the lift or elevator, that the first floor plan shows the 2 doors and the second floor shows just the one. So which one going into the hallway. So that I think that the one on the top of the screen would definitely go onto the stage, and the one in the hallway is access from the hallway.
Perfect.
The second floor only has 1 door that accesses the hallway.
And you're referring to these blocks that Matthew was telling us about too,
Well,
right?
they look like they're doors. There's
Yeah.
three panel doors that swing open. Yeah.
Perfect.
You also
So,
have
yeah.
that notation underneath that says confirm location, size of equipment. So maybe that's just a comment that they'll confirm that later on.
Yeah, so we'll nip this one early. Like I said, we're gonna make sure that we're fighting for an elevator over here, and then we'll confirm. I agree with both John and Matthew's comments that this does look like an indication of doorways leading into the stage, which is fantastic. Glad they addressed that piece. But we want to make sure that we're not using a key lift over here. Alrighty, let's jump into the next couple. So basic elevation drawings, just so you guys can see the outside of the school. Took a look at the majority of these in the
Is
first
it-
couple of, sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
Is it my eyes, or is that pole purple?
Over here,
Yeah, I just,
my eyes see the same color. Yeah, it's purple.
okay, I'm just making sure I'm not completely overtired.
You could be both, but I'm seeing purple. Alrighty, going over to the elevation drawings. Let's zoom back in. So the barrier-free parking over by the front entrance that we were taking a look at. So again, principal and vice president. Over here, we've got the barrier-free parking. The slopes look good over here, 1%, basically everything is less than 1.5% for the barrier-free parking. So had no issues with that. I had a pretty good scan around the school. Everything looked to be under 5%, which is what the AODA expects. So no issues in terms of slants along the exterior path of travel. The one that I did note in my comments that you guys would have seen is over here for the slope right in the barrier-free parking. And so it'll be interesting to see what the developer says. They're indicating 5% right along the edge of the barrier-free parking. And then right next to the access aisle, it looks like it flattens out pretty significantly to pretty much 2%. So either way, I made the comments to meet with the cross slope and slope expectations of 1% and 1.5%. So they should be able to come back with that piece, but we'll hear back on that piece for the second submission. But other than that, I didn't have anything that I caught. I don't know if you guys were looking through and saw something that I didn't, but everything else looked, like I said, 5% or less. So that meets the standards of the legislation on that portion. And then we'll just finalize and go through the last couple of drawings. This is for the electrical, so included in there, but none of us have expertise in this area, so nothing for us to take a look at. And then we have the landscape plan. So Matthew, I know you like to comment on some of the landscape and the treescapes or the trees that are used. Any questions about any of the locations? I don't know if you had a chance to kind of dig through this.
I'm looking, but most of it's kind of standard stuff.
Yep, standard stuff, nothing impeding the exterior path of travel. Like they have the landscaping located over here right next to the front of the school, but widths are adhered to, no issues with any travel over there. And then I was taking a look at the rest of the site plan again, no issues. And then what do we got here? There's a couple of pages, but I think we're pretty much through the majority of them. Yep. And this is just, again, repetition of what we've already looked at, so we don't have to take a look at that again. That was pretty much it, guys. And so I will quickly go through my comments. Let me just jump back over to the front page that we were looking at originally. Whoops, one too many. Let me just go through my comments because we were just going through that in detail. I didn't have my paper in front of me for those pieces. So in terms of comments that I indicated to the developer, additional to what we were mentioning, so rest and seating areas to be provided along the exterior path of travel. As part of the accessibility guideline standards that we are implementing as a municipality, we like to have them about 30 meters apart, so nice and close. Automatic door openers for all public access locations, proper installation of the tactile indicators of the staircases, which we talked about when we were going through the site plan application. So for all the locations where we might have customer service counters, so any of the principal offices or the general locations, we're asking for making sure that they have an actual induction loop available in there as well. So this would be for meeting rooms, seminar rooms, and I think I mentioned that as we were going through those locations. At the very beginning, for these drop-off locations, I was mentioning a rolling curb. Again, there is something indicated over here. I just want to make sure that it's actually for the drop-off locations as well. We did address the actual gymnasium. So it looks like they do have an area to be able to access the stage. So that will be addressed, but we'll just confirm the actual lift being an elevator. And then for the slope over here for the barrier-free parking, again, mentioned that the cross slope and slope should be between a 1.5 and 1%. And then the final considerations that I had for a conversation piece were just to make sure that this barrier-free parking is converted to a type A. And I know I asked the question at the beginning and probably didn't give you guys a chance to comment on it. Would we like to see an additional barrier-free parking spot added in over here? There is only 10 spots from what I remember located in this specific parking lot. So one technically meets the standards. If we feel like two would be beneficial, you guys can speak up about that piece.
Two.
Two? Okay,
That's my vote.
I think two.
okay, no problem. Okay, and then the emergency evacuation chairs for each of the staircases that have been provided as well. So those were the comments that I made for the specific site plan application. And then I know we've been having a good discussion as we've been kind of going through it, but any other comments that you guys want to see addressed in there? Any other questions? Do you guys want me to jump back to any of the maps? Just let me know.
Matt, can we potentially push also for the oh, why am I blanking on words now?
Snoozland room?
Well, yes, that'd be
Yeah.
nice. But no, but also for the only word that's coming to my head right now is a push button. The accessible push buttons, because I can't think
The
of
door
words
operators?
right now. Yeah,
Yeah,
the door, thank
for
you.
what?
For the community classroom.
Yeah.
Because if it's a complex needs, that could be very beneficial, one, and two, could help with access for the individuals depending on their needs.
Gotcha. Got it. See, we got to it. I knew what you were saying.
It's been a long day.
I hear you. No worries. Oh, I can turn my face back on. I'm not nose deep anymore. There we go. Okie dokes.
I was texting my wife as we were speaking. She's a vice president or vice principal.
That's right. Yeah, new terminology, guys.
But she used to be part of for quite a few years, part of the IDT team, I think it's called.
Yep.
And she would deal with a lot of the high rollers. And I asked her about that padded room, and she says sometimes it's helpful for kids with autism if they like to push up against the rooms, but also regarding Haley's comments in terms of the naming, sometimes they would call them either a calming room or a sensory room or a self-regulation room, which may be a little better terminology than a de-escalation room.
Yeah, and I think that will be to what you were mentioning. When they do like their wayfinding signage for each of these rooms, they probably would actually have that conversation as to what they want to name it. And then this is like what we're seeing over here is the developer kind of mapping out what the school would look like. So I agree with what Haley was mentioning, and same with the information you're getting. I don't think they're going to be calling it a de-escalation room, especially considering how sensitive everything is right now in schools. So I don't think they'll be using that terminology, but I agree with
if we want to
Haley.
make any suggestions, I don't know if it's appropriate, but
Oh yeah, we can make the suggestion. I'll be mentioning in there as well because even just any of the facilities that I visited, even like Holland Bloorview, when you go to the hospital, the snoozland rooms that they have there, that would be, I think, the right path to be going. It's expensive, but I think it's beneficial. It's definitely beneficial for those with sensory needs, not only to de-escalate, but to actually have different tools at their disposal, and it'll help the support persons that are actually supposed to be going into the rooms, to Haley's point, to actually have a variety of equipment to help them out. So I'll be mentioning that piece in there, to just have snoozland room equipment to be considered for those as well.
Yeah, also having like different seating types, so like bean bags or different types of seating is often very helpful. It is a push to move towards more of a self-regulation room. There's a big push right now for all self-regulation versus anything else. And a big part of that is, you know, different seating and stuff. So they have, because right now, oftentimes those rooms are empty.
Oh, and then John, when you were texting, any information about the unisex conversation that we were having as well, or did you not get a chance to get that piece in there?
I didn't ask that.
Okay,
part.
yeah, so we'll hear back about that anyway, so that's not a big deal.
I think it's important that if we use something like calming room, or even that means sort of that you've had a problem, I think even a relaxation room would be better or something, but you know, they have to think about those things, about how the person's been acting and whatever's happened.
Yeah, we agreed. So I made the note in there as well. So on top of just kind of going into the equipment being used in these, again, quotes, de-escalation rooms, I'll address the language as well, just to ensure that they're using something a little bit different. Okie dokes. Great conversation. Any final pieces before I pass it over to Rochelle? Great, cool. Great points, everyone. Rochelle, it's back to you.
All right, so if there are no further comments from the committee, I will call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Moving on to item 6.4, our roundtable discussion regarding the Town of Aurora Accessibility Plan 2018 to 2024. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion?
Haley?
Thanks, Haley. And
Matthew.
a second. Thank you, Matthew. All right. Matt, did you want to begin our discussion on this?
Absolutely. So let's start off with operational capital projects, and then we'll jump over to the actual survey for the accessibility plan and what our next steps are on that piece. So last month we talked about operational projects. Like I said, we closed everything off in November, so nothing changed for December. All the invoices are paid. We're officially done for 2022. Staff members were actually starting to inquire about 2023, and I wanted to chat with you guys very briefly. We'll talk in more detail come 2022. But similar to the discussion we were having with Haley about the de-escalation rooms for the school, we were looking at actual snoozland carts to be starting to use. So we obviously got the equipment for the sensory tents once we're able to use them past COVID and have individuals kind of using those at our events. We were looking at the actual snoozland carts as well. And so again, I'll call you out, Haley, because I know this is your area of expertise, whether or not that's something that you think is of value. So we were looking at this as something to be shared between the Aurora Family Leisure Complex, the Stronach Recreation Complex, and in addition, once we're starting to use those rooms for our special events, this is something that we can bring over to them as well. So if we're ever having like a Rib Fest, or if we're having Canada Day at the Aurora Family Leisure Complex, we could put them in some of the meeting rooms for people to go in and use as a snoozland area to kind of further sensory needs. So wanted to ask the committee, not just Haley, but I'm calling Haley out because I know she works with this stuff. If you guys have an opinion about it, seen it, and its utility, and whether it's been useful in your experiences.
This you may not know. What is the specific goal of using it and how would it be used?
So there's going to be multi-use. There's going to be for our events, just if people need to be going in and they want to kind of get away from the event. But it's mostly going to be used by our community services team. So for our integration programs, we actually, like for our community services team, use calming rooms and stuff. So they've used bean bags, different types of equipment So that would actually be an additional piece that they have available for sensory needs for not only our programs, but then like we were talking about for our events, it's an option for that as well. So when I was taking a look at these carts, they have, it almost looked like a miniature Snoozland room, right? Like they had like the colored tubes, they had the strings, they had, and like each of the carts were a little bit different in terms of like the equipment they offered. So it depends on how much money you want to spend, as it is with any pretty much product. But I want to make sure that it's worth us going down that road and seeing whether or not any of you guys have had any experience in using them or seeing them at any of the facilities that you kind of have crossed by.
I think they can be helpful, like in addition to things. I think more in terms of like self-regulation stuff, which Snoozland stuff can be helpful, but having accessibility to different types of equipment and not just necessarily, because Snoozland has a lot of, oftentimes it's more visual.
Yeah. I find they have some good tactile stuff in some of these carts as well.
Yeah, some of them are tactile and stuff, but some of the stuff, like making sure you're hitting kind of all of those areas in a cart, I think it's a good idea, but maybe not just snooze and stuff, looking towards having, again, going towards like a self-regulation cart or something that has a variety of different items, including what would traditionally be used in a Snoozland room, might be more beneficial for a variety of individuals.
So that's good. I'm going to be doing some research. And like I said, this will be an item for us to be taking a look at next year regardless. So maybe I'll come with a couple of options for our February meeting. Go ahead, Matthew.
So it's like a cart?
It's mobile, right? So you can take it like to different locations and stuff. And so some of them are different. They open up and it kind of creates a room. Some of them are just, like I said, a cart that rolls and then you have a couple of items to be distributed. So it depends. So we'll take a look at a couple of the options that we have available. I want your guys' opinion on it because based on your fields and your experiences, I'm sure you guys have had some uses in them. From the staff members and including when I was in recreation, like we have seen these used in the past. Some are better than others, but I'll definitely get your guys' opinion on a couple of the options that we'll take a look at.
What's the terminology you're using? I'm sorry, I've never heard of it before.
Snoozland?
Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, so similar to what we were talking about in the school between like calming rooms, some people call them de-escalation, which de-escalation room and like calming rooms are generally more bare bones.
Right.
Snoozland rooms and Holland Bloorview's got, again, some really cool examples. They have one for its pool and they have just a regular room itself. They're generally dark rooms. They have a bunch of sensory equipment in them. So I'll use the pool as an example. They have like colorful balls. It's very calming. There's no noise in the room as well. So you can kind of regulate yourself. They'll have different kinds of fiber rods going in there, tactile equipment. So tons of different pieces of sensory equipment for people to go into and use. So it is a funny name, Snoozland Room, but they've been around for a number of years now, and you're starting to see a lot of facilities start to add them in, especially like your public sector or specific hospitals that are geared towards this stuff. But they're not popular by any means because they're extremely expensive. You're talking like if you're putting an official room into a facility, at the bare minimum, probably 50,000, probably closer to like 75 to 100,000 for like a true Snoozland room with all that equipment in there.
So the cart would be moved between facilities, or would it stay in one facility? I'm a little bit.
We'd be looking at pretty much the AFLC or the Stark. And again, we don't have a true Snoozland room, right? We only have our meeting rooms and stuff. And so for us, if this was using by community programs, they would probably block off like the windows to create a dark room, bring the lights down so it's not as bright, bring that equipment in there. And that's kind of our retro fit style of using a Snoozland style room. but we don't have something that's true snoozland style where you have that calming effect through darkness, auditory, and all those pieces in there. So this is kind of us meeting in the middle. And then in future builds for the town of Aurora or additions, that's something that we would be able to have a conversation about, is adding in a snoozland room to the facilities that we have. Okay, so anyway, this is going to be a next year conversation anyway. We don't have to go into a deep conversation. So I just wanted to throw that on your radar as something that's been being brought up right now by staff members for something for us to explore in the new year. So I will bring it back up for February. We'll have a more wholesome discussion. I'll bring in a couple of options for us to take a look at, and then we can discuss which route we want to take with that. But I just wanted to kind of throw that onto your radar. The actual Town of Aurora accessibility standards are complete. It is officially going to be put onto our website tomorrow, it looks like. Our corporate communications team is they're having some issues with getting the coding onto our website, but it seems like it's been resolved. So I was told that they should have it by end of day tomorrow. So if you go over to the accessibility page on the Town of Aurora, we have a drop-down menu for where it will be placed, and then it should be up by the end of the week. And then, so as soon as that's done, I'll send you guys a link. You guys can check it out. Very excited. So this will be implemented for anything that's going on 2022 moving forward. So all these additional standards on top of the Ontario Building Code, Design of Public Spaces, AODA, the Town of Aurora for any of our stuff will have to adhere to these pieces of legislation and standards. And then I think our next goal in the future terms, speaking with our planning team, is to start to work towards how we can get private businesses and developers to start meeting these standards as well. And so this is geared towards us as municipalities, and our planning team is in support of actually moving towards the private route as well. It takes more time, obviously. And so that'll be our next step, I think, as a committee in the next 4 years. I hope you guys all come back. I can't believe we're almost there. But yeah, I think that'll be our next road as well, is not having this just a municipal piece, but for private organizations to meet as well. So I will send you guys an email as soon as that's live. I'm expecting it tomorrow, probably Friday the latest, and then you guys can check it out. That was it for operating capital. But like I said, everything else is closed off for the year, so nothing else to discuss over there. We'll jump into the actual Engage Aurora survey that we ran for the last 5 weeks to add comments on top of our accessibility plan. So we had about 196 people that went onto the actual site, checked it out, took a look at the plan, and then for some reason, only 13 people actually went through the entire survey. So a decent amount of people taking a look at it, not that many people that responded. So as I was going through the comments, and this won't be every comment, I kind of broke it down by the 5 standards in the AODA and what kind of came out as like the main points that we should kind of discuss. And then the report itself will be attached over to the accessibility plan that's going over to council in the new year as well. So you guys can take a look at the responses in detail once that gets handed out in the next month or two as a council report. And we can kind of, if you guys feel the need to go through it in detail, great. But I think I summarized the majority of the points for each of the standards now. So we'll just talk about them very quickly. Underneath the customer service standard, the main comments that were kind of coming in, and this wasn't related to us, I think, in accessibility. This was more, I think, towards our corporate communications team and providing updates on resolved issues. And so there was a couple of comments adding in saying that, you know, like we get the complaints up on our social media or our website, and then it seems like people were mentioning that they're not actually getting resolved issue comments back. So that was something that was being talked about on a regular basis throughout the survey. And then the piece that was, I think, good for us is there was a lot of talk about the accessibility programming that we do over here. So I wanted to chat with you guys because I come from the recreation side, as you guys know. I was there for quite a while in aquatics, community services and whatnot. So we do have, I think, a good number of inclusive programming in each of these sections. I think the comments were stemming more from, I think, the amount of potential cancellations that were happening. And especially with COVID, right now there wasn't as much, I think, registration going into these programs. And so some of our programming, including those for inclusion needs, were getting canceled. So there was some complaints coming in on that side of it. And people mentioning that they want to see more accessible programming coming in. So totally agree, more than happy. I wanted to hear your guys' feedback on that piece as well, based on what we kind of currently have, if you're aware of our programs. And maybe it comes down to even just what we're talking about, the awareness campaign that we're launching next year, and just letting people know that what we have available and when it's kind of running more regularly on social media. So just curious to see your guys' 2 cents on that piece.
So I could tell you from my own experience, because I actually tried to run a music program a couple years ago at the town for inclusion. We never ended up getting any I think we never met enough registration. So I think the awareness campaign is really important, because I think people are unaware. And when I asked people, they were never aware that it even existed. And so that's a little bit of my own personal, because we tried for, I think, 2 or 3 years to run a music program and could never get enough.
Yeah. And when I was in rec, so this is going back 4 years, the aquatics programming was always full, like every single time. And I ran group lessons, I ran private lessons, I even ran like semi-private lessons. They were always full. And then I remember in the community services side of things, summer camp programming for our leisure buddies and everything, that was always full. But I think the struggle was always September to like June time, getting enough registrations for those winter programs, to like what you're mentioning, kind of like those one-offs, whether it's like music, art, anything in those sections that may have had some issues. But I agree. I think and underneath the information communications pillar, there was some great points talking about that with social media awareness about accessibility, and even accessibility in social media. So we'll talk about that momentarily. But maybe that's where we kind of start to kind of nip this comment, is start working on the awareness component. What kind of accessible programs do we have running? Because we usually, I think, have to have, I think it was 50% capacity from what I remember to run a program. So like if it's a 12-person registration, they wouldn't really run it unless they had 6. If it was like 4 or 5, they would sometimes still push it, but they were trying to keep it usually to like, I think, a 50% minimum.
How far back was this in time, Matt? Because, I mean, you have to remember that the people of nearly up to 2.5, 3 years now have been backing off most things. So how far back did this go?
Oh, this is when I was there. I'm talking from when I was there 4 years ago.
Was it 4 years ago?
Yeah, so especially now over the last 2 years with COVID, I think things have probably changed quite significantly with people just being home. I don't think people are paying for as many camp services or programs. But it's a good conversation to have with our community services team right now to see what it looks like in terms of our registration numbers with COVID, and whether people are coming in and actually filling up these camps.
Well, I know a lot of people. My daughter's pulled her 4 children out of school for the past 2 years, so they're still out. And she just won't send them, so they're doing homeschooling. So, I mean, it makes a difference, because they don't go to other things either. And they just go out and do things with them on their own, you know, walk and do things, but they don't participate in anything.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's probably a part of it. Especially for members in this community too, right? If you're immunocompromised or anything, people are taking this a lot more seriously, from especially individuals with disabilities, because they're at greater risk. And now, especially with, I think is it Omicron? I'm starting to get lost with all these mutations that are happening with COVID at this point. But people are just going to probably go into another scare once winter session kind of comes in here and flu season's back upon us, right? So I agree that might be a part of the reasoning for some of the more recent cancellations in these programs. But I'll speak to our rec team about that for sure.
Certainly, as my daughter's scared because her son has asthma and bronchitis problems too, and he went into life support for 2.5 weeks, and this was just at the beginning of COVID, so she certainly didn't want anything to do with it, you know.
Yeah.
So she wouldn't register them anywhere.
Yep. Okay, so under the information and communication standard, we had some comments coming in about just more awareness. So this is something that we've already started to address. We're going to be doing our video campaigns, but I think something for even me to work on for the next term over the next 4 years. I'm definitely not a social media guy, so never bothered me in the past. But I know a lot of people use it for a number of communication modes within the municipality, right? So I think giving people more information about what we have at our events, for example, and we do it. It's not that we don't. I think there can just be more media blast kind of coming through about some of the things that we do at our special events, right? Having our exterior paths of travel laid down. At Ribfest, at the Santa Parade, we had a specific viewing gallery provided for those that have accessibility needs. So we can start pushing that out. And then the other piece as well that came through is actually making sure that the social media content itself is accessible. And I know that's been a big point being driven from Matthew. So we've officially made all of our content actually on social media. I'm actually training our corporate communications team next week on it for doing social media posts in an accessible format. And then we'll be meeting with staff members and council members who obviously use our social media platforms as well on how to make their social media posts as accessible as possible for individuals coming in. So that will be addressed already in 2022, but it was good confirmation to see coming in from the survey as something that people want to see as well. Furthermore, in the information and communication standard, a couple of comments were coming in about just using larger fonts on our different media blasts and stuff. So one of the things for that piece is I think people going to what I was mentioning about awareness, we use Browse Aloud on our website. So people have that capability to enlarge their fonts, change the contrast. If they want to get rid of the images, all of those capabilities are built into our website. Max, when he was working with us, he actually built a how-to guide as well. It's on the website to kind of guide people through using Browse Aloud. So again, leads into just the awareness piece and letting people know that it is available for them to be using. So we can work on that for sure.
I haven't seen that on the website.
Here, I can share my screen and show you guys right now.
Like I seen Browse Aloud, but I haven't seen like the guide on how to use it. So
yeah, give me 1 second here. I'll show you guys very quickly. Let me share my screen. You guys see that? Okay. Just move your faces over. Yeah, if you jump into the Browse Aloud section, and I'm gonna move your faces again. Towards the top of the screen, you'll see a bunch of the different functions that you can use. So if you click on any of them, they all have different capabilities. So I'm not going to play around with it too much over here, but like this is what I was mentioning with simplifying the page, right? If you guys want to be able to remove a lot of the images, this will make things a little bit easier for those with dyslexia. There's a bunch of different features, like you can change the contrast, right? If you want to have black on white, like you can make all these pieces a little bit different to help your requirements in terms of accessibility. So we do have this. Sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
How does it work with the drop downs? I know the town loves drop downs on web pages.
You're talking about these guys.
Those, yeah.
Here, I hate these.
So do I.
Yeah, and the reason is technically speaking, the issue with they're called accordions. The issue with accordions is if somebody doesn't open this, right? If you're fully dependent on screen reader technology and you're going and it's reading through this component and you get to the accordion, it's not going to read all the components within the accordion. So it's an interesting conversation because you have our eSolutions vendor who are advocating that these do technically meet the standards for accessibility. My opinion, and I've been pushing back on this since we started using them, is I hate using accordions. And I understand, I get why they're there. It makes the page look pretty. It's easier to find information, all those pieces. But in terms of readability, it's obviously beneficial to stay out of an accordion and just be able to go through the whole page itself. Even though the page is going to be extremely long, that's the absolute most accessible way to do it. So to answer your question, Matthew, no, I don't like the accordions, and I don't think we should be using them.
Yeah, because as soon as I use my tool, I can click on an accordion.
Yep.
And then I go convert to accessible mode, show in accessible mode, and it automatically, I can't read the accordions because it disappears. It only shows the main text.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, right? Like the accordions really shouldn't be used. So I'm not sure where eSolutions, who the corporate communications team hired on to build our website. I think it was back in 2019 or 2020. Being like they're using this, and many municipalities, most are actually with eSolutions. They're all using this. But I agree with you. Anytime I've tested websites using assistive technology, there's just bugs with accordions. So even the code should work using an accordion. I find that in terms of practicality, there's always some kind of bugs.
Hey, Matt, where the guide that was written? It said that
Right here. So if you click onto the accessibility page right up on the side, you can click on Browse Aloud. And then you can see this is all the work that Max was doing. So how do you open it? How do you create your text to speech? And then he had images kind of teaching people how to use all of these components. If you want to use the translate component, it teaches you what it does, how to use it, and it does it for each of the different components over here in the Browse Aloud. So this is what I think the comments were asking for on the social media portion of the Engage Aurora survey that we received is these specific tools. So we do have them. I think it's a matter of just ensuring that people are aware of them, how to use them, and where to find them essentially.
could you just go through that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, here. So let's just, so I got to minimize your face. Let's go back. So if you go onto the accessibility page, as soon as you're on the main page, right here on the right side, yep, you've got your Browse Aloud.
Okay.
You can click on that, and then it'll lead you into all the accordions on how to use these tools.
So you can't get to that from the main page and clicking Browse Aloud at the top.
Yep, so if you use Browse Aloud at the top and you know what you're doing, the actual tool, but if you want the information on how to use each of these specific components, you'll have to go to the Browse Aloud page to learn about how to use these tools.
The accessibility page, and then it'll.
Yep, you got it.
I have another like beef with the website. And this is
Do
just
it. I always have beef with the website too, so let's go.
When you're on the front page, let's say you want to go to the you go down to upcoming events, you go to Accessibility Advisory Committee. You click on that event and it tells you about the event, but it doesn't have a way to link to the actual like agenda. So you have to go hunting through the other, like your governance section and committees and councils to find the document, to find out what's going on.
So is this the page that you're talking about where I am right now, or are you talking even before you get to this area?
So go back to the home page.
Yep.
Scroll down to the section that says upcoming events.
Yep.
And we'll pick ours just because it's easy.
Yep.
And you'll notice that it talks about the event, but it doesn't actually link the actual documents.
Yeah, you're right. Nothing's hyperlinked on here. Add to my calendar. That does suck. Yeah, you have to go through a bunch of these links basically to make it all the way over to that main page.
Yeah.
And even there, you're still missing it. I've always used the Your Government section to find everything. Like if I just go Your Government agendas, but I see your point over there with hyperlink it directly in the upcoming events, making sure that these are actually hyperlinked.
Yeah, it's not like a difficult thing. It's just, it would make people's lives easy.
It's
Because
just
if you don't
usability.
know that, you're not going to find it.
Yeah, it's a usability piece, right? So that's just, I guess, a corporate communications team just making sure that they link all those pieces for sure. Okay, I'm just going to keep us on track here. So going on to the other three standards, underneath the employment, there was mention of inclusive hiring practices and hiring individuals with disabilities. We have both of those already included in the plan, which is great. So Council recently received in November the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Strategy for the upcoming term that was approved. So that'll obviously engage with the inclusive hiring practices component. And then we also added into our plan, which we were talking about, partnering up with the schools here at the town of Aurora, bringing in students with disabilities to have meaningful co-ops here with the municipality. So that was great to see as comments coming in through the survey, and we have already added that into our plan as well. So that was good to see. Underneath the transportation standard, which is handled by the region, but I added it in there regardless because I like to see the feedback that's coming in. And so it gives us an opportunity to work with the region and maybe have more opportunities for our two committees actually to discuss the transportation standard. But a couple of the pieces that were added in there for just our bylaw team, better enforcement of accessible parking. Wanted to actually chat with you guys about this because one of the things that bylaw brought up to me prior to COVID was I know council members were receiving a ton of complaints from individuals with disabilities that were using the accessible parking, getting ticketed, and then they were just missing their permit that day. It wasn't up or maybe it fell down, that kind of situation. And so we were directed to lay off enforcement of accessible parking. And now we're kind of getting feedback to go back to pushing and enforcing it more regularly. For those of you that have been using permits in the past or from your communities, have you guys heard any individual feedback on this specific subject on how the town has been enforcing the barrier-free parking? I'm curious to see your insights on that piece.
I know when I go to like businesses that have figured out that I'm on this committee, their concern is there's always like not enough enforcement. Like I remember I sent you an email about one business that had an issue with that. And then the other point was, I know a couple individuals have pointed out to me that like certain plazas, like around grocery stores, people like to use the accessible parking spots as cart stalls, which is a big problem. And
Cart stalls, really?
yeah, especially up on the 404 near Walmart. Whenever I see it, I take the carts out and just be a nice guy, but
The other big thing is the winter time when everybody pushes the snow in there from the parking lot, and that's where they put it, is in the handicap parking. And I've asked the managers of the store, and they say, well, we don't pay for it. It's the whole plaza guy that pays for it. But you think they'd be interested in knowing that they're blocking places for their people to go to? And I found it in about 3 or 4 different areas.
Yeah, and I know that's been an ongoing discussion for us as a committee over the last 4 years for sure. It's unfortunate that the property, or I guess the business managers of those specific areas aren't more keen on just calling the town. Our bylaw team is great about that. As soon as we are aware of any barrier-free parking spots being put in with snow, they go and address it right away. It's like you're mentioning, Joanne, I think it's more just the individual businesses that need to have more compassion towards that if they're noticing it, and helping the community out when it's being seen to let the town know to go address it through their bylaw team.
And sometimes you have some aggressive bylaw officers too. Like a few years ago, and I brought this up to the committee many years ago, but I was in a store and lined up behind an officer, and somebody said, "How's your business going today?" And he said, "Oh, we're catching all the suckers." And he was wearing his uniform. And but I knew who he was, so I did bring it up to a couple of just privately, I brought it up to a couple of councillors. But he was speaking right up and being loud and everything, and it was just terrible. I just couldn't take it any longer, so I made sure that somebody found out about it.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the businesses, like that one that we had issues with last year, the business reported it to the property owner, but the property owner basically told the business, well, you can shovel it out if you want.
Yeah, and
the only reason why I got fixed was because of you and bylaw. Like,
And that's going to be, I think, the forever issue that we're going to be fighting on these kind of topics is property owners that just own millions and millions and millions of dollars of these plazas. To them, it's just like a complaint. It's a drop in the bucket kind of situation for them, unfortunately, right? So,
They don't.
yeah. So for us, unfortunately, it's going to be a continual push to just kind of advocate and continue kind of going after them as we catch them case by case. Unless something happens from a policy perspective and fines increase to something I think more drastic, where people take more care about this stuff. I think we're always going to have, unfortunately, that issue happening in our winter months, especially bad winters where they start running out of room where to pile the snow. Then they start cheating for sure and start finding the best spot to hide it.
Also, some of the issues are the public attitude. I'm just going to be a minute. My wife is in there. They don't have a permit. I've heard them page people at Shoppers Drug Mart saying, please remove your car. You don't have a permit.
Right.
So it's those attitudes as well. Signage maybe, but I
And
think the
like I said,
$300.
yeah. And the awareness campaign that we're talking, like Haley's initiative, like this is a great opportunity for a lot of these pieces to be addressed. As you can see, every conversation, there's like one other thing that like starts adding in. You'll see like there's going to be tons of this. So this will definitely be a whole 4-year term project with all the different subjects that we're going to be talking about in this. But this is, I think, definitely one of those items that, especially during the winter months, that we will be and should be taking advantage of.
Yeah, and if you're also sitting in your vehicle or anything like that, and your name doesn't match the card that's got the signature on the back, there's a humongous fine.
Yeah.
Well,
Just
they take the permit away.
Yeah.
No,
they take the permit away. So
they don't in some
confiscated.
cases. They forget because they're driving somebody else, maybe their wife, but they go and park there, and then they stay in the car.
Okay, I'm just going to keep going through the points here because we have a decent amount to go through. So that's in the plan. And so I'll continue speaking with bylaw about the enforcement piece as well. That's not an issue. They're more than happy to enforce and hand out tickets. I think it'll be balanced as well because, like I said in the past, we had these enforcement opportunities where people were going out and really looking at the barrier-free parking, and then we had some pushback from the community actually on this topic. So when I speak to Alex Ray, who's the manager for this, I know that's his response is going to be like, which way you want me to go? Because I get in trouble either way. So we'll have to balance that component. In terms of the design of public spaces, so a lot of the comments were coming in over here. Many of them, I think we've done a really good job of already addressing in our accessibility plan, and as well, obviously, through the accessibility design standards specifically for ourselves as a municipality. All of this will be addressed whenever we're doing our renovations, retrofits, and new builds. So that's a good component. So a couple of topics that were talked about, accessible counters. I know, Rochelle, that was one of the big things when you came onto the committee, kind of chatting about that, asking questions. And so we have some of our facilities that have had their counter spaces retrofitted include the accessible spots. I think the signage could probably be more visible for those in terms of wayfinding. So that's something we can obviously continue to work on, but that'll continue to happen as we retrofit each of the floors in our buildings, new counter spaces added in. That'll for sure be added in. This was a good one. So there was a component being asked about in there for town events to have accessible planning committees. So in the plan that we've constructed, I have a couple of ERGs, like employee resource groups, being built specifically to accessibility. A part of it will be the community services side of it, which will include event planning. Shelley Ware, for those of you that have ever met or worked with her in the past, does our events here for the town of Aurora. Fantastic advocate for accessibility. She always reaches out, asks questions whenever she hears from the public about components, is always pushing for these things. So going back to what we were talking about on the information and communication side of these things, I think it's going to be a component of making just people more aware of all the features that we have. So For example, Santa Parade, we were showing people that we have the accessible spots. If we're ever having our huts at any of our events, we've purchased ramps for people to be able to access them. So even from an employment perspective, or people coming in for, I forget if ours is called Halloween Haunt or whatever our version of it is, we have access to be able to get into these. We bought those Moby mats for Rib Fest. So I think, again, this ties into what we were mentioning with the social media component, just making sure that people are aware of the accessibility planning that we do put into our special events, and that they are accessible for kids to be able to come in if they have mobility issues, sensory issues, anything along those lines. So we'll continue to work on that piece. Downtown, the revamp of the downtown was mentioned in there, and we were just talking about that, I think 2 meetings ago, where we had the steering committees come in and ask your guys' opinion on what the changes in downtown. So we are starting to work towards that, which was good to see. And then the last couple we've all talked about, so more door operators in our buildings to a variety of rooms. One of the pieces that we added into the accessibility plan is just a full door operator project. So what we've been doing in the past is using our operating budget to work on pieces here and there where we feel there is a need, but we've added in basically a capital project to address all of our buildings at once, so we don't have to be using our operating budget on an annual basis to create access to a variety of our rooms. A couple of the interesting ones, and I'm curious if anyone has seen this at various of the municipalities. I know it's been talked about on a provincial level. I've seen from a couple of our neighbors, scooter charging stations being added in to facilities. Have you guys seen these or have ever used them in the past? I see Haley nodding her head. I don't see the whole committee on here, but I see her. So I thought that was a good component to add it in. We don't have that on our accessibility plan. As far as I'm aware, most scooters charge on regular voltage chargers. So I think it's more of indicating which of our outlets can be used at our facilities as charging stations, and then adding in the wayfinding signage for that piece. So that wouldn't be anything difficult for us to add in as a committee. I'm more than happy to add that piece in there for something to work over the next 4 years in terms of our plan, because it's not difficult to add in. It should be pretty easy to go. And the last one that was mostly talked about by the community, and we've already talked about it as well, is accessible parks, and what kind of features that we're adding in whenever we're adding or retrofitting our current parks. And so a lot of the comments were mentioning rubber surfacing. And so we've come back to parks a couple times about that. They're on board. It's going to be a balance going to council and getting the additional funds for it, which is the difficult part. Wood chips. And I want to mention this as well. So wood chips underneath the province legislation technically passes as accessible, which I think we all can agree it's not really. If you're ever using any kind of mobility device, it's extremely difficult to go over wood chips, but it technically does meet the bare minimum standards. But we've pushed for rubber surfacing on the previous park that we were looking at, and Parks has agreed to kind of put that forward in their budgetary requirements moving forward. So a couple of the other components, we're just using accessibility swings, anything along those lines more regularly. So these are all things that we can address very easily. And that was pretty much it in terms of comments coming in from the survey. Like I said, only 13 people actually commented in on it. So that was a summary of it. And you guys will get the more specific version of the survey once I build the report, send it over to council. You guys will all be involved on that piece, and you guys can see all like the nitty-gritty comments, but I took the more large ones and wanted to bring it over to you guys, and then I'll add the other tad bits into our accessibility plan that fit with where we're going over the next 4 years. But any comments or questions on that summary?
So my comment is on like the parks thing. So like on GIS's map in Aurora, they have Lundy Park, which is behind my house, as it has accessible tactile features. The problem is there's a 1 foot drop to get from the sidewalk to the wood chips to get to the actual accessible tactile features. So that's not really accurate.
Yeah, well, the conversation that's being had on on a provincial level right now is full accessible parks. Can you get into the park? Can you join in and use all the equipment? That's, I think, the issue, is because the legislation is, in its defense to some degree, it's good that it's so open, right? So like service animals, for example, having the legislation as open as it is making sure that anyone that requires emotional therapeutic service animals, great. But then for same components for playgrounds, having it open as making sure that you have sensory equipment or anything along those lines, it's too generic, right? And people are able to get away with just kind of saying, yeah, we've got tactile equipment in there, but did we really address making sure that the surfacing is good? Is there access to get onto the surfacing? Can they get to the actual equipment, right? So that's where we for sure, as a municipality, need to just work on just exceeding the basic minimums and being able to access it. But to your park piece, we can update those pieces as well. Just maybe providing more detail saying that these pieces of equipment are there. There's a lack of barrier-free access to be able to get to these pieces of equipment.
Because I've like asked the town to add, like parks to add wood mulch and stuff. They send out someone, they measure it and they say, oh, no, it's up to our town spec.
Yeah.
And so hasn't changed. And it's been like that for 4 years. And every year, every spring I complain, and every year they send out someone to measure it. And every year it's the same answer.
Yeah. And like I said, with the woods, like with the wood chips, even if we fill it up, it's always going to get blown around, changed like every season. I think we just need to be basically moving over to a better surface for all of these parks in order to make better access for individuals to be able to get in. Okay, and then the last thing for our committee meeting today, I'm going to just share my screen very quickly. As promised, we have the title pages. Oh, my screen is frozen. There we go. Bear with me 1 second here, guys. Alrighty. Okay, so option number 1. Option number 2. And then option number 3. I will go through all of them again. I'm just opening them all for you guys to review, and then we'll go through them in a second. Just getting them all open for you guys.
I like number 1.
Okay, so.
Can I point something out though?
Yep, I just got these this morning, so.
Technically number 5, like what I've been handing out to businesses from that accessibility from Business Point, technically number 2 is the only one that's accessible because there's no writing over a picture.
This is my favorite one. And that's what I was going to say is this is the most accessible title page option that we've had. And like I said, I'm going to be training corporate communications about proper like social media and graphics for accessibility. So I know, Matthew, you're mentioning number 1 was your favorite. This is the most accessible one that we have over here in terms of contrast, having your writing separate as well, Haley. So this is the most accessible from a wholesome lens. This technically still passes accessibility requirements. And because we're looking at it from a digital lens, when you're looking from an accessibility tool, I'm just going to move your faces and I'll give you guys just a very quick lesson on this piece. If you do an accessibility scan on a document like this, there's a couple of different components that come up. And so you can see like this one hasn't been addressed right now, but like alt text, everything. So when a screen reader is going over this, it's going to be able to tell through the content tree what's built into this document. So normally this would open up and in your page, you're going to see the different types of containers. So in these containers, you're going to know in the background, we have an image and you're going to have an alt description that goes to it. And then you're going to have a paragraph container that tells you this is the Town of Aurora multi-year accessibility plan. And then further containers will give you more information about this page. So I agree. I'm totally with you that my preference is to have the page that meets the highest standard. But this technically, as long as it's made accessible from a coding perspective, it's fine to go. So I just wanted to just point that one piece out. But I do agree with your comment. My preference is option number 2. So just in fairness to everybody, just take a look at all of the options again. This is option number 1. Option number 2, which is what Haley was referring to. And then this is option number 3.
I
And
do
so-
have like a
Sorry, go
point.
ahead.
I want to point out something. Like they're using, like the green is good. The turquoise is not that great because the corporate colors are that blue color. So wouldn't they want to keep with the corporate colors that are the town of Aurora now, like the bright blue and the bright green?
Bright blue and bright green won't pass contrast testing.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
That's why they did that. Okay.
Yeah, so those RGB colors for those lighter turquoise colors, we shouldn't be using.
I definitely don't like number 3. Let me say that.
Okay. I'm gonna make this easy. Does anyone like number 3? And then we can go to number 1 and 2 and discuss. Does anyone like number 3?
No.
Okay. Close
Fortunately,
it.
I can't see any of them.
I know,
so-
Joanne. I was gonna say I'm gonna mail them out to you. I just got them today, so I wasn't able to get them out to you in your package, but I will send them to you through mail because I want your opinion on it as well.
Number 2 looks very corporate to me. Number 1 seems a lot more fun. And as long as they comply, my preference is number 1. It just looks more
Okay.
fun. Number 2
Yep.
looks more corporate.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that though, like number 2 is more like aesthetically pleasing in terms of the colors and the way they've got it sort of balanced. But I think number 1 looks more engaging. Like you want to, I feel like I want to read it more for number 1, but it makes me want to turn the page. It makes me want to really dig into it. But number 2 has got the right balance of colors and spacing, as we've sort of already discussed. But
Yeah. Okay.
I like that point.
And we can adjust this too, guys. So like even to Haley's point, like we can move this down so that way we can kind of have like the happy middle where this is also on white as well and the contrast is better. So this isn't even, it's not like this is the only way we can look at this. So if you prefer the styling of number 1, we can make the adjustments as well for the font to be on the white to meet that piece as well.
yeah, that might work.
Yeah.
I
Is
think
anyone?
that's a good-
Sorry, go
sorry.
ahead. Haley. No, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, that's a good compromise, just because if we're asking businesses and we have this whole plan, especially in this plan to go out to businesses, and then we're not following what we're asking them to be doing, you're not going to get buy-in.
Yeah, so like I said, more than happy to make that piece. So I never get to do this part, but are we in agreement on number 1? Aye.
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 Sure.
Sure. Was it gur or sure? I didn't hear.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm good with that. And that was it for items on my end. So I did lie to you guys. We pretty much went right to 9 o'clock. So I apologize, but not really. I prefer to have wholesome and detailed discussion. So that was really good. Any other questions, concerns from your guys' end on the accessibility plan? I know we've talked about it for a couple of months at this point, but any final pieces before I start getting ready to build a Sir Council report? No? Well,
No.
you guys will see it again anyway, because it has to go to council. So it's not the last time we'll be talking about it, but we're pretty much towards the end of it. I think the plan is very wholesome. I think it's well done. So kudos to you guys. Thank you for all of your input over the last couple of months and years, really, for what we're going to be moving towards in the next term. And I hope that all of you are able to return back for the next term and kind of see through all the commitments that you guys are planning on having kind of set out for 2022 to 2026. So that'll be great. But if there's nothing else, Rochelle, I'm done for the night. Back over to you.
Okay, so if there are no further comments from the committee, I will call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries. And we have no informational items this evening, so that leaves adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Matthew.
Thank you, Haley. And Matthew, can you second?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. And